or
Hmm.
in a remote data center or whatever, like there was limits to how much data you would have. There was limits, like you were smarter with it. You weren't just collecting every single thing. You were collecting what you needed, and the rest of it you were disposing of, hopefully in a secure manner, right? And then the people that are dealing with petabytes and exabytes of data, that was like Google. It was, a handful of firms, right? And I'll give you an example, right? Like I was talking with a company just a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about data security. And I asked them, all right, like how much data do you actually have? Do you know? And they told me petabytes of data. And I remember, like, it kind of set me back because back in 2014, I was talking with like wasn't a threat intel company. It was like a threat intel company, but for the federal government.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were talking about having issues with storing petabytes of data and having it rapidly accessible. And now this random medical company is saying that, oh yeah, we have several petabytes of data, like it's just another day. Like of course we have petabytes of data. It's like, man, that is an extreme amount of data for you to try and sift through and categorize and, building controls around it. And I asked them how they were doing it, and they said, oh, we're not doing it at all. We just kind of hope that nothing happens, because like it's such a difficult problem. And I was talking to my data security guy, and he told me, straight off the bat, he's like, yeah, this is, on average, minimum an 18-month project of someone devoted to them. Like that's all that they do every single day, 18 months, categorizing data, building policies around the data just to secure it, just to figure out what you actually have.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, SaaS did this, and, the mega scalers sort of helping enterprises, entrepreneurs along the way, right? So petabytes of data, what at one point in time when everything was on-prem was well in control, now it's not, right? And even that's why you also see that even cloud security companies that started as a CSPM, Snap took a broader term, and then they are also looking at data security as a very strong adjacency. But what we have realized at Bonfire is that most of these companies are able to look at things in silos, right? So either at data at rest, which is, okay, let me just go and classify, terabytes, petabytes of data, get that visibility. But then what after that, right? It is obviously a healthcare company will have healthcare data. A finance company will have finance data, and that's not surprising. That that's what they're expected to do. But once you discover and classify and get a sense of where the data is, where the risky data is, now that thing is obviously the elephant in the room is Gen AI and AI. Now, sort of that insatiable appetite that it has for data, it wants to go and sort of devour data wherever it is from an enterprise point of view. And now you're talking about fragments of data. It's not like data at rest or data in motion. But hey, I'm asking ChatGPT or Claude to go and figure out or compose an email taking customer or financial data from this file sitting in SharePoint because I have access to that file. Now the agent is now a proxy of me and accessing that data at rest, creating something, an artifact that I'll take, either send it consume it as is or modify and send it in an email or share it as a memo, right? Now it's no longer just that getting that visibility that the traditional data security providers are promising, or not just looking at data in motion as a silo and just looking at this email has PII data. But now what you need is a much more holistic data security solution, which does what it's supposed to do, which is to secure the business first, right? Data is one aspect, or data security is one aspect of it. Obviously, other vendors are providing their domain expertise from a network security and identity security point of view. But the two main actors right now, or two main components in this day and age, is data first, and then obviously who is sending the actors, I would say. So tying these two elements or entities, as we call it at Bonfire, and learning about the not just the enterprise but the universe that it is existing in, with all the partners, the vendors that it is dealing with, the employees, the insiders, and then the risk that they bring to the table as they interact with data at rest, creating fragments using Gen AI and sharing it, and then there is this other big family of data consumers and producers that is coming up are agentic AI and the smart applications that enterprises are building. The developers are hungry to build in way more smarter applications, leveraging all these intelligent models. So yeah, petabytes of data, traditional data security, obviously they do what they are supposed to do by design, but that's not good enough when it comes to doing data security in the Gen AI era, as we call it.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like anything else on the market is probably even capable of keeping up with it, right? Because, I've had on data security experts before, and I think I even discussed this with Giddy, where, data is like the new oil, right? Like, where I wouldn't be surprised if, countries end up fighting wars over data, right? I mean, that's a weird thing to say. It's a weird thing to think about.
Rare material.
Right. Because it's so like transactionable, I guess,
Absolutely.
if that's a word, if that's a term, right? Because, you could sell it, you could sell the same piece of data, thousands of times over, millions of times over. It doesn't matter. It has reusable, characteristics to it. Now, I'm sure eventually, it would get so populated within whatever ecosystem that you wouldn't be able to sell it anymore. But, still like it's we're at the precipice of something, especially with, Gen AI and LLMs and agentic AI, creating, because now agentic AI is just essentially out there like creating new data for its users,
Absolutely. Yeah.
where it would have used to take, a human to interact with a website or a payment system to do it. Now a bot's doing it in, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, right? And then moving on to the next one. Like that's creating data at a scale that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah, I mean the volume of data is absolutely something that is happening. It's not something that is yet to happen. It is happening. But what's more important, Joe, is that obviously data without context is not as interesting. It's not as from a data security analyzers like us. You know, so you talk about data and how it's going to be important, but even more important is what could be something sensitive for one business may not be sensitive for another business. So looking at data scale, volume that is being generated at in context of the business is the key problem to be solved, right? And nobody is actually doing that effectively. Right, everybody, it's an overloaded term these days. That hey, contextual intelligence, contexts have been around for the longest time, right? Like even at Cisco, when I was there doing network security, folks started talking about, hey, where's the application context? Because you're using Cisco gear to transfer packets from point A to point B, but for an application, right? Similarly, talking about identity security, you cannot be looking at identity security just as a silo, but the various contexts that come into the picture. Very similarly, you bring all of these things together and they actually form context for data as well, because at the end of the day, data is serving the goals of a business, the goals of entities that are actually consuming and producing it. And these days, obviously, in addition to the human entities, now there are machine entities that are equally, if not more, hungry for data in order to consume more intelligent stuff and in order to help the enterprises meet their goals.
Hmm. Do you think that this is the last question before we like kind of dive in and take a look,
Yeah, yeah,
right? But
absolutely.
do you think that now with Gen AI and just how the cloud is and everything, do you think that the scale of data that I talked about, with like Google, where Google is operating on a scale of data for decades that no one's ever even seen, right? I mean, they're coming up with new names for the amount of data that they're getting. And this was, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, like it was like that. Do you see the same thing now happening, but to like everyone basically? I mean, is everyone starting to get to this point where you're generating so much data, or you could generate so much data that it's basically unheard of or unseen, outside of like the big tech companies?